Glad you're with us. The New York Times is out with reporting on an apparent standoff between Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his generals, a clash between, quote, Mr. Hegseth's highly partisan worldview, in which he has written that the Democratic Party really does hate America, and the longstanding tradition of an apolitical military that pledges an oath to the Constitution. It's a rift inside the Department of Defense that, according to the Times, could shape the military's top ranks for years to come. Joining us now, New York Times national security correspondent and MSNBC political contributor Helene Cooper, who also was bylined on that reporting. And Helene, you highlight that Defense Secretary Hegseth has declined to promote General Douglas Sims after 34 years of service. General Sims is now planning to retire in the coming months after not getting that promotion. So you also report that this is apparently due to the close relationship that he had with General Mark Milley, if everyone's following me still, whom President Trump, of course, has accused of being disloyal. Even pressure from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff apparently wasn't enough to sway Hegseth on Sims' promotion. So how significant is the general's departure, and what does this whole situation say to you about Hegseth's decision-making?
Hi, thanks for having me. You know, we've seen this at the Pentagon from day one, from the moment that President Trump was inaugurated. You know, within hours, he had people taking down the portrait in the walls of the chairman's hallway of General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because Trump doesn't like him. And you saw immediately, like not too long after that, President Trump and Pete Hegseth, his defense secretary, fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, because he's a black Air Force pilot, and they wanted to crack down on diversity. This was part of their war against diversity, equity, and inclusion. They fired the first woman to ever lead the Navy. They fired the first woman to ever lead the Coast Guard. They fired a slew of officers, military officials, who they believe were either too close to people that they didn't like, or were black, or were women. And now we're seeing that with a white general, General Doug Sims, who was on the joint staff, and he was due, he had 3 stars, lieutenant general, so he had 3 stars, and he is due for a 4th star. And Pete Hegseth has been stymieing that. His first reasoning, the defense secretary was that he believed that General Sims was responsible for leaks, when that proved not to be true, and that was an unfounded accusation. He then said that he changed course and said that he would promote him, and then he changed his mind again after the now chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, intervened on behalf of General Sims, and the defense secretary decided no, he's not going to give him his 4th star, because he said Doug Sims worked for Mark Milley and was viewed as too close to him. Everybody in the Army practically worked for Mark Milley at one point, because Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So you're looking at a fundamental problem right now between what is supposed to be an apolitical military. Military officials are supposed to be there no matter whether they're Republican or Democrats. They're supposed to serve under both the Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. And you have a clash between these generals who are supposed to be apolitical, and then you have a defense secretary who is making career decisions on very partisan lines. He doesn't like Democrats. He's been very clear about that, and he's been very quick to fire people or put people on the outs who he believes were close to the Biden administration. So it's a different way of looking at military service. In the case of General Sims, this is a guy who had been in the Army for 34 years, Helene, under both Democratic and Republican administrations.
Sorry to cut you off there, but I have to ask you, though, what are the national security implications, or is there the potential even for a brain drain at the highest levels of our defense establishment here?
There would probably be a brain drain. I think we're starting to see that come about. The national security implications are huge, in part because you can't have the same kind of military that salutes a Democratic president should be able to turn around and salute a Republican president. you can't have a military that becomes a MAGA military. The military is supposed to be the American military. That's the military that we have. And a military that is highly partisan is not going to be as concerned with readiness and ready to fight against America's adversaries under the kind of two-party system that we have. So you are looking at the possibility that people who are tagged as too democratic end up leaving the military. You could see a brain drain. And then what happens when the next president comes into power? And are you going to then get rid of everybody who is tagged as too Republican who's in the military? That's not viewed as a good way to go.
Helene Cooper, thank you so much for your reporting.